Hey everybody, welcome back and thanks for coming to week 8, or actually last week of the season of the Fellowship of Fans deep dive analysis of Rings of Power. We're really excited to have some fantastic guests today. Of course, we have Strider back as always. Thank you, Strider, for being here.
Always a pleasure. Very excited for this one and happy to have our guests here.
And we have two very special guests today. First off, we have Sean Gunner. He is the longtime head of the chairman of the Tolkien Society, the long-standing leading community for the life and works of Tolkien. Sean, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we have Killian Sunderman, comedian and podcaster joining us from Dublin. Say hello to the fans.
Hello, guys. I feel very out of my depth in terms of my knowledge. I hope I don't make a fool of myself.
I should have introduced him as noted Tolkien superfan. And then we've got Harry doing the back end today. So major props for helping with everything where the people can't see and making sure everything goes smoothly. Harry, thank you so much for helping out today.
No worries. Hello.
Before we dig into the episode, I'd like to start with just chatting with Sean and Killian a little bit. First off, I know Harry and Strider's sort of points of view on the shows pretty well at this point, but this is the first time I've gotten to chat with you guys about it. So let's start with you, Sean. I would love if you could introduce the audience. First of all, let people know where they can find you, and I would love to know sort of how did you get involved with Tolkien to begin with, and sort of what is your take on the first 2 seasons of the Rings of the Power, sort of writ large.
So I'm going to kind of answer that in slightly in reverse. So I first came to Tolkien via the Lord of the Rings films. So I was about 11-ish, and there was a trailer at the cinema. I think I'd gone to see, obviously some other film. I don't know, it was Toy Story or something. I don't know. I can't remember what it was. And I saw this trailer for the Fellowship of the Ring, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. There's this cool wizard and stuff like that. And then I thought I've got to read these books, and I read them, and then I was hooked. And at that point, a few years later, I went through every single Tolkien work. I joined the Tolkien Society, and you can follow the Tolkien Society at Tolkien Society. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok-ish, Threads, wherever. You can find us everywhere. And anybody can join the society anywhere in the world and get our publications and discounts at our events and stuff like that. And we exist to educate the world about Tolkien. In terms of Rings of Power, I've always been apprehensive about it. I think it's fair to say. I think it's well known that I have got some views about the show. Having said that, ultimately the thing I love about the Rings of Power is it's bringing people to Tolkien. So I'm meeting people now who are reading the Silmarillion, who are reading Unfinished Tales or Fall of Numenor, or even the History of Middle-earth for the very first time. I think that's to be cherished. I also think there are some really lovely moments in the show. So as much as lots of us will focus on the bits that infuriate us, there are other moments that are a delight.
Yeah. Before we move on to Killian, I'd love to just press you on that. What is one moment in particular that you do think is really lovely within the show? We'll find places to quibble about what's not. Don't worry, we'll get there. But I would just love to know, what's one thing that you've really liked from the first 2 seasons?
There's one character who, for me, is an absolute standout, and that's Adar. He is, I think we'll come on to this later on in the show in terms of where his story goes. But I was also pleased to see that actually the showrunners mentioned how Simon Tolkien also said that this was an important character and needed more time. And I agree with Simon Tolkien, and I agree with the showrunners. I think he was an important character, and he's dealing with some really important Tolkien aspects, right? Are all irredeemable? Are they de facto evil or not. And we're told in the Silmarillion that the origins of the orcs is elves corrupted, and that's who Adar is, and we're told that as well. And I think he is a really interesting character. I wish we were seeing a hell of a lot more of him.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. I totally agree. Well, same to you, Killian. How did you get into Tolkien and sort of, also please, sell yourself. Like we want people to be able to find you places. Give people a sense where to find you. And then what's your take on the show or the second season? Run us through.
Yeah, well, I got into Lord of the Rings through I think my mum got the tapes of the BBC radio adaptation by Brian Sibley, and I think like a few of the cast of the movies are in that as well. I think Ian Holmes in it, and a few other people. But that was what I first got into it. I remember listening to them as a kid, and then obviously when the films came out, I was like a kid when they came out, and they perfectly kind of like I was the right age for a person to become totally obsessed with them. So it was first the radio adaptation, then I read The Hobbit, and then I watched the movies, and then I read the books. But I was always more of like a movies guy, and then I go back to those radio adaptations a lot. I think they're really, I mean, I don't know if they get talked about enough, but that original thing, which actually, Peter Jackson and all, they took the script of that, they kind of looked at how to gut the books and put them in a format, and they used that script very, very, like, they used a lot from that. So if anyone's like looking for a bit more Lord of the Rings, that's a very good place to go to. But then, I guess like the Rings of Power, I was like, really looking forward to it coming out. I had a friend who worked on it in New Zealand. He's an Irish person as well, and he said that the accent coach came up to him and apologized, and so we knew in advance that the Irish accents weren't going to be great on the Hobbits. But I mean, he was like saying it's a really big budget, it's really cool, it's going to be really great. So I was a little disappointed by the first season. I thought there were really great moments. Again, like Sean was saying, I think there's like really great moments tied in with some like storylines that just are kind of either confusing or a bit wayward or just a little bit ploddy. But the second season, I actually I've like really enjoyed. So I'm kind of in a place right now after watching the 7th and 8th episode, which I think they're following that format where they just put all the good stuff at the end so that we're hooked in for the next season, but give us kind of a ploddy first few episodes. I'm kind of like hooked and can't wait to see the next one, to be honest, and I'm on a bit of a high about it.
And I'm gonna do some pushing for you. Killian's got a book that was released very recently.
Someone is saying there, I can see, I'm reading Killian's book at the moment. Very funny book. I mean, I wrote a book called, I don't know if we can curse on this, but you can see there on the screen, it's Country Fail, Some C Words Guide to the Countryside. It doesn't quite have, the depth of narrative that Tolkien has in his world, like Middle Earth. But there is some sort of vague narrative to it. So if you want to get it, it's available now.
Awesome. And, one of the reasons I was excited to have the two of you on today is we have on one hand, Sean Gunnar, the chairman of the Tolkien Society, someone who is really versed in all of the facets of Tolkien, the whole legendarium. And then Killian, who, if I remember correctly, your degree is in film, and you have a huge movie fan, and but not as deep of a knowledge of like sort of the fall of Gondolin and stuff like that. And so I thought it'd be really cool to get sort of two perspectives on this as we go through today. So, anywho, let's get to the episode. And thank you for the intros, everybody. We're going to kind of start with one more sort of big survey question. I want to know what you guys thought of this episode. Strider, what about you? Let's start with you. What were your thoughts?
I really liked it. I think there's always some moments that, especially I think like in the battle, there's like a lot of moments where it feels like there was like a couple of scenes cut or something like that. Like there's some scene after scene, it doesn't always make a lot of sense. There's like, it seems like something's missing, and there's like a couple of these moments, also like this rom-com love triangle moment. I was not a fan of that. However, those little things aside, I did like it because we saw Anatar doing Anatar stuff. I mean, we saw Sauron doing Sauron stuff. At this point, he's not Anatar anymore. He was lovingly, adorably evil the whole time. I felt like there was a lot of good moments. There was even like some of the light-hearted comments, which with Gil-galad, he had like two scenes where the charm of Benjamin Walker came out. So yeah, I really like the episode. We had great endings for a couple of characters. We'll get into that a bit more later, but overall, yeah, I think it was an appropriate ending for a much stronger second season.
Yeah, I'll chime in with my thoughts. It was the first time, I think, in both seasons where, although I did still have some, issues, again, we'll get to them, but it was the first time that I just sat and enjoyed the episode entirely. Like, and the problems I had did not outweigh my enjoyment of actually watching some pretty cool things happening on screen. People might have, contrasting opinions, but I think it was probably my favorite episode of the show. What about you, Killian?
Yeah, I mean, it's a toss-up between a 7 and 8, but I think entertainment-wise, I think that the previous episode really had me. But I think that emotionally, the character arcs and moments that this episode had were just like really good, like really high level. I thought they tied things in with like, I guess like I guess we'll talk about it in a bit, but some of the stuff that we know watching it, just as people who know very vague things about Lord of the Rings, they were really good at interworking kind of moments, and I really thought that Celebrimbor and Sauron, their scene together, was just like really, really brilliant. I was like, maybe my favorite part of the whole show, and then like the beginning with Durin and his dad, like that, they were really emotional, brilliant scenes that I thought were like excellent filmmaking and TV.
What about you, Sean?
Yeah, so it's a mixed bag for me. So I think one of the challenges with this episode, it's one of the challenges with the whole show, is that they're playing with so many different storylines at the same time. So, we actually, did we really need a scene in Pelargir? No, that only really existed to make sure that we knew that Isildur was still alive, right? We didn't really need to have a bit in Numenor. That didn't add a lot either. And if we're really honest, for the whole series, the Hobbit haven't added anything either, right? And actually, we could have done the Gandalf scene earlier on, and arguably we could have done that. Moving forward and back between the different storylines, I find that quite challenging. The other thing I was going to say is, but for the overall, in terms of this episode, if I took those things out, I think it would have made a good episode, a great episode, actually. I think if we just focused in on the elves, if we just focused in on what was happening in Octinethil and Eregion, I actually think that would have been incredible. I agree, the scene between Sauron and Celebrimbor with so much emotion, both of those delivered award-winning performances, I would say. The other one is between Galadriel and Sauron, and Galadriel and Adar. All of those scenes were filled with emotion, and you had a sense of the gravity of Middle-earth and the sense of what they're all fighting for here. It's the first time you felt like this was a grand battle. In the past, up until this point, it felt like we've been dealing with little stories individually throughout Middle-earth. This was the first point where you had a sense that there was something bigger at play here.
I think it's a really interesting way to put it, and you actually kind of made me think of something that Tolkien himself sort of did in The Two Towers and The Return of the King, where he sort of takes the storylines and he really splits them up. It's not this sort of modern kind of back and forth, and I kind of wonder, like, maybe if we are going to get the Harfoots in like a more significant sense, what maybe it would have served to just totally leave them out of season 2 and then like put more time focusing on them in season 3 instead of this like constant intercutting, and then you got to be with people or you're forgetting what's happening and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I think, presumably in the next series, so we've had the Harfoots in series 1, we've had the Stores in series 2, presumably we have the Falahides in Series 3, and then some point between Series 4 and 5, Gandalf brings them all together, and they go back to Susa, the Shire, right? They get their Shire. Presumably that's what we get in Season 5. Now, that's a lovely little thing, but it's completely irrelevant to the story of the rings unless they're finding a way to work them in somehow. And that's going to be the challenge. The bit I slightly struggle with this whole story with the Hobbits and with Gandalf, because we've got a bit of a problem with Gandalf, right? He's come into the story of Middle-earth too early. So what is he doing at the point when Sauron, when we get to the end of all the rings are made and we get to the back of the last lance? What's Gandalf doing, right? Because apparently what he's doing is wandering around in Rune or failing, right? So there's a bit of a problem about him as a character there. But for me, there's a broader problem, which is this assumption that you must have, for a Tolkien story to be successful, you must either have hobbits or rings in it. And we've seen this with the War of the Rohirrim film as well, where in the trailer ends with, "What is Mordor interested in rings for?" There's no reason for that to be part of the story. And I think this story would have been much easier if we didn't have Gandalf and the hobbits in it. And in fact, Bombadil and the Ents, at times it felt, episode 4, I could not stand at all, because it felt like we just chuck a load of random Tolkien things at the screen and see what happens. Actually, if they'd had a little bit more space to make the story of Anatar, Sauron, Galadriel, Celebrimbor, if you gave that more space to breathe, I think this would have been a more satisfying experience, because that was, in this episode, that was where the story was, that was where your heart was, that's where you felt invested.
Well, let's get back to the top of the show, and let's start with what Killian was talking about, that cold open with the Durins, which was an extremely metal open. I think whether or not it fit with everything else, I will talk about that now, but it was hardcore as hell. Strider, what did you feel about that cold open? And we'll get into the specifics, but we're getting a lot in this, right? We're seeing the two Durins. There's a bit of a reconciliation thing going on. There's a whole cavern of Mithril. Just give me your first thoughts about it.
Yeah, a lot of things in this show kind of feel rushed, and a lot of moments, even when they're good moments, often it feels like there's at least a little thing missing. But I feel like I do feel like this kind of we're just gonna close this huge plot line in the first 5 minutes, and then we're good. I mean, I think it's done well, but it's just kind of a weird concept. We open an episode where there's a dwarf fighting a Balrog, and it's okay, we wrap this up and we move on. So on paper, it sounds like an odd thing, but I do feel like the acting, I feel like just Peter Mullan, who plays King Durin, and Owain Arthur, who plays Prince Durin, I feel like they managed to make this scene really good. They always had this very strong connection as between the two characters. A lot of great acting from the start, and then I feel like they make it into a good scene, even though it does kind of sound like maybe something would be missing in theory, but in practice they managed to pull it off, and I was quite happy. And there was that moment also with it wasn't me letting you push your arm up, it was you getting stronger, which was a really, really lovely delivery of a father to a son. So I feel like in the end they managed to elevate the scene into a quite a good one, even though I would not have expected it.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the acting. I mean, again, we were talking about the filmmaking aspect, Killian. You were bringing that up. What did you feel about the acting? The father-son relationship here, and I guess just the visual aspect. Okay, what was your impression of the visual aspect of the Balrog?
I know there's a whole debate about wings that we can probably get into some place. I don't think I'm versed enough, but maybe Sean, do they have wings? Do Balrogs have wings?
So I've got a theory about this, is that they do have wings, but they're vestigial. So they're like giant penguins, right? Because in the first age, Balrogs keep falling off mountains and dying. So we're pretty sure they can't fly, but they do look cooler with wings. So Yeah, giant penguins. That's my theory.
Okay, sort of like an appendix.
Yeah.
Something like that. Okay. Yeah, no, I I thought it was a very good scene. I think that they do it very well, and that the father and the son are really, really similar. They have it's it's their own the personality types of stubbornness and stuff that we associate with dwarvishness. So it's like, I mean, I think it's really well tied in. I think they are really convincing and very dwarfy in how they I just think that they're very like I mean, if you watch The Hobbit, there was some very undwarf like dwarves in that, and I found in their characters they seemed very like dwarfy and stuff, and this kind of the whole thing being them being able to kind of admit things to each other and be less stubborn and stuff like that, and I guess like during King Durin, like calling his son King Durin and then turning and like attacking a Balrog with an axe and then clashing. Like I thought it was a very, as you said, metal moment. That was like it could have been an apex of a show, and the fact that it started like that, I was really into it. It's always it's like a cool guy explosion kind of moment, but it was a little cheesy almost, but it was just I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think with cheesy moments, right? You gotta like commit hard, and they committed, right? Like they were all in on the moment, and I think that's sort of what made it work, you know?
Yeah, that was great.
Victoria says a little while back that she really wanted Gandalf to appear in the Balrog scene. Well, Victoria, you just had to wait a little bit longer, and we'll get that in a bit.
He did the whip around the foot thing though that he did to Gandalf, which that must be. I don't know how he must practice that while he's down there alone. The Balrog just practice whipping the thing around people's feet because that seems to be his favorite thing to do.
Yeah, I guess that's his move, you know.
Yeah.
So Finrod84 says Balrog came out for 5 minutes and then got sealed up again, like your favorite band coming out on stage for 10 minutes, then canceling the show. Sean, what do you think? Like, let's dive in. I know we can be as tough on this or as easy on this as we want to be. Is the Balrog going back to sleep now? Are the dwarves totally screwed going forward? Like what do you think is going to happen? We'll dip a little into theory and expectations and sort of theories about the next season and stuff. I guess this is the last episode, so we have some leeway to do that.
Yeah. So the questioner is actually right to hint on this problem, because actually this scene was a fantastic scene, beautiful, amazing VFX, it looked great. But then by the end of the episode, they were just like normal dwarves, just doing normal dwarf business in Khazad-dûm, right? When they got a massive Balrog living underneath them, right? That's not rational, okay? So I mean, what Tolkien tells us is the Balrog's going to be there till I think 1980 of the Third Age. Somebody can check that whether that date's right, or 1981 of the Third Age. But in this show, I'm expecting what's going to happen is by the time we get to season 4 or 5, Sauron with the ring will kind of reawaken the Balrog, and that will be the dwarves leaving Moria and heading off to Erebor. So I suspect we're going to kind of get that at some point later on in the show. The showrunners did hint at it that this was not the last time we'll see the Balrog. So I'm guessing that season 3 he's going to like quietly be just like rumbling, practicing his whipping moves underground, and then later on we're going to get him coming back for War on the Dwarves. So yeah, I mean the scene was wonderful for me, but the fact that they kind of just go back to normality, afterwards, that doesn't work for me. You've got this giant Balrog just there, and also the giant Balrog knows they're there as well, right? This giant Balrog just sitting there waiting, going, "God, I'm just waiting for somebody else to dig too greedily and too deep." But until that happens, I'm going to sit here for thousands of years. Like that doesn't work for me, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Well, just aesthetically, it did look pretty cool. I think.
Absolutely, aesthetically, it's on point, beautiful, and I can see in the comments that the wings debate's going on. I think they handled it very well, actually, in terms of wings. They were mostly wings of shadow, which is actually similar to how Jackson dealt with them in the Fellowship of the Ring as well.
Yeah.
I agree with you. He was absolutely on point. And can I say, Also, one of the things I love about this show is I think Khazad Dûm is on point. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, you know what I really loved about Khazad Dûm was seeing all the greenery and the way they manipulated the light and stuff. That was pretty cool. And the last thing, I have one more question that I'm going to throw to Strider on this, but before that, I just want to say this: you're right on the shot right now, Harry. This shot of the Mithril in the caverns of Khazad Dûm was pretty spectacular. It was this moment of like, okay, it's not just a nugget here or there. This is the wealth of the dwarves of Khazad Dûm, which I thought was pretty special. But so my question for you, Strider, and like I said, then we'll move on because otherwise we'll be here all night. King Durin takes his ring off in this moment, and after everything we've seen, just like the level of greed that now we from the show that the Dwarven rings are supposed to cause and everything, why do you think that this is the moment that he's able to do that? Is it that he just finds the courage? Is it the face of death? Is he trying to save the ring? Is it because his son actually gets to him with the impassioned monologue? Like, what's your take on that?
I think it could be like something like him. I feel like it's a combination of different factors. So the fact that there's this fiery monster that's here and we are in trouble, and I have caused this, so that alone could be like enough of a shock to probably like shock him out of his state of mind. The fact that his son is there, that his son is in danger, that his kingdom is in danger now with this huge fiery monster. But I also like to think, at least that's kind of like a headcanon at this point, that perhaps it's also a combination of the fact that he had this ring for a while now, and perhaps he managed to kind of get accustomed to it enough to like release himself a little bit. Like, for example, like what if putting on this ring and this ring getting you, what if that is something like being like I'm missing the word in English, like when you get like all like in a guard or something, and then you finally learn how to release, and like maybe it was something like that as well. But I think it's probably just a combination of like these factors of like a lot of emotions and a lot of big things, a lot of the sense of threat towards him, his kingdom, and his son. That's probably the main thing that helps him finally get it out.
Yeah, and I like that notion of sort of accepting death, right? That like, if you really truly do accept that your death is here, you don't need the ring anymore, even if it would have a hold on you in life, right? Not to get ahead of ourselves, but kind of like why the ring has no effect on Tom Bombadil, in theory. But we'll get to Tom. Let's scoop forward a little bit. I just want to give a shout out to the Balrog amidst the opening credits. I don't know if you guys took the time to notice that. That was pretty cool. But let's get to Rune. That's I think the first thing after these opening credits. And well, before we get into the details, I just want to ask: are any of three of you fans, like major fans of the storyline, like contrarian to the sort of general opinion of the show, and actually like love the Harfoots?
No,
Not a fan. They're borderline offensive to Irish people. But no, it's also just it's. I mean, I agree with Sean. It'd be a much better show if it wasn't there, and it doesn't need to be there, and there's no reason for it. So yeah.
Well, you know what? I tend to mostly be on the same page as you guys, but I see Andrew has a comment. Seems like the theme of the show, or maybe just this season, is read Nori's narration that some things that break can't be fixed. I think it might be Poppy's narration. That comes at the end, and I was going to sort of get there, but like, let's just do all of Rune and the Hobbits in one, so we don't have to come back to it. Like, I actually think of what do you think of this as sort of like I don't know, one of the best parts about Tolkien, right? And sort of the way he threads in sort of canon work in Lord of the Rings and in The Hobbit, he threads this sort of like moral compass of the Hobbits. They're not like all perfect or anything, right? But they sort of provide the background of like sort of the moral thematic elements of the show. Do you think that maybe we're seeing a little bit of that here? Sean, what do you think? I think
muted.
sorry. Yeah, sorry. Yes, a little, but I think one of the challenges here is that, to my earlier point, is when the hobbits are doing that in other stories, it's within the context of the wider story, and that's not happening here. So it just sometimes it just feels a little bit like someone's typed into ChatGPT, give me a Tolkien sounding Maxine, right? And it just sounds a little bit like, oh, or they just steal something that sounds like a lot like from the Peter Jackson films. It just feels a bit too on the nose. Yes, I feel like there is a moral heart to the hobbits, halflings, and stalls currently that we've got here, but it's not a heart to the show because they're not with everybody else. If they were saying that to Gil-galad and Elrond, I feel like that would be more powerful. I mean, I'd be annoyed for other reasons, but I think that'd have more impact.
Yeah. Well, let's pause on the Harfoots really quick, and let's talk about the Dark Wizard. I want to know. Well, first of all, played by the fantastic Kieran Hines. I don't know if you guys have seen him in a lot of his other work, but he's an excellent actor, and I think he does a good job here. But there's a couple things I think we should chat about. First of all, who do we think he is? Strider, I've asked you this question not on streams before, so I want to ask Killian first. I'll come to you for my next question, Strider. But Killian, what are you thinking about what we're seeing with this guy?
I mean, I don't know. He's kind of I can't really fit him in. I can't really understand who he is. Like, he's doing some things that seem to be like echoing some things that Saruman does in terms of how he is acting towards Sauron. He's like, he wants to defeat him or kind of, become sort of powerful in that way. But he's obviously not Saruman. So I don't really know. He's kind of confusing. I don't know if he is like one of the East Stars or something like that. I don't know. It's kind of, he's a sort of confusing guy. But I mean, it's weird. He's in this place. I did find it interesting that the people he's kind of controlling, that they said that they were kings. So I was wondering maybe there's more to them or something like that. I did like when the hobbits were like, or the Harfoots were, he was like perplexed at how they might be showing a bit of mercy to the people who had a knife at their neck, and they were kind of like, he was like, what you're going to be nice to someone who, well, not, and they were doing that kind of morality thing that you were saying that Harfoots are kind of, hobbits are kind of known for. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do find the whole narrative a bit, bloated, and I'm like, the action is somewhere else, and I feel diverted from it. And just because he kind of mentioned Sauron a few times, it doesn't mean that they're really part of the whole story, and I don't really see where it's going. So it just feels put in. So yeah, I guess that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, it's fair. What about you, Strider? Do you have a particular theory about that, and also I want to add on to this. You have a theory about the men in masks, like who those guys are. The main guy says, "My people were once kings." Like, what are we seeing here? Do you have any thoughts about how this all fits together and who these people are?
I just made up a theory who they are. It's a very deep lore theory. It's not true, but it's a cool theory. These guys are so in the Silmarillion, the first three groups of people who show up are called the Edain. They're like the good guys, the three houses of the dwarves, of the men, and then we have Easterlings who show up. And I'm just gonna say these might be descendants of those Easterlings who were cursed by Morgoth or someone for some reason and have this curse of the flesh. That's my off the top of my mind, 10 seconds old theory about who they are, because otherwise I have no idea. But regarding the wizard, as someone said in the chat, and I feel like I was going to say something very similar. He's a dark blue wizard, and Gandalf is going to be the substitute gray blue wizard. And I feel like that's kind of what's happening, because he's not Saruman. Let's just get that out of the way. Even though Kieran Hines he could be a great Saruman if there was some kind of way for him to play Saruman. He would be a great Saruman. But this is just the dark blue wizard, and that goes well with one of the versions of the story of the Blue Wizards. He fits to a T. He fits perfectly in this whole dark Blue Wizard gone rogue scenario. So I'm sure it's that. It's just a question of whether they will at some point get the rights to call him a Blue, but it doesn't matter that much. And I feel like Gandalf will just be taking over as this other wizard who is like this other Blue, but instead of the actual Blue, is going to be Gandalf the Grey, who might have. I mean, he does have a canon-wise, he does have a blue hat, so we can just get that, and he can just be like a light blue wizard. Yeah. But this dark blue.
Now I'll tell you guys, when we actually watched this scene and the way it unfolded, my problem wasn't so much with the action and like the dialogue and the characterizations that we saw here. My problem was that we got all this without any sort of real sense of the character build-up and development that we would need to get to this point. And then they try to rush it by like, having it's sort of, it's along the lines of what Killian was saying, right? Like he sort of rushes it by trying to get Gandalf, what we learned to be Gandalf, to like come to his side, and he's mistrusting him, and then the hobbits are all mistrusting of him, even though he just saved their life, and that doesn't really rationally make sense. But I feel like if we'd given some room to see a bit of development of these ideas, there was something potentially kind of cool here. And so I want to guess, Sean, I saw you comments in the comments that you think that the Harfoots is more about what we're going to see going forward and potentially setting up them sort of making their way to the, what will eventually become the Shire, or at least where they're going to settle before the Shire. Do you want to speak a little bit about that and how you see that might unfold?
Yeah, I mean, just a break consensus. I absolutely think Ciarán Hinds is Saruman. Like, absolutely, I do. Yeah, and I mean, look, the one thing we know about this show is, they basically tease you all along to make you think someone is not who you think they are, for them to always end up being who you think they are, right? So we basically Gandalf and Sauron are both examples of this, right? So Gandalf, they spent the whole of the first series trying to make us think it wasn't Gandalf, right? And then spent the whole second series convincing us that it was, right? So he absolutely is Saruman, but there's lots of good reasons why it is. First of all, he's dressed in white. Secondly, he does confirm that they are Istari, and he does say that in the dialogue, that there's 5 of them.
Do you mind if I interject? I want you to keep going, but Harry, would you possibly put up a poll for the thing? Yeah, I want to know what percentage of our audience thinks it is Sauron.
Yep, doing it right now.
Oh, awesome! And keep going, Sean, and then we can. I just want to get your thoughts.
So he's dressed in white. He says that he's Istar. He is an Istar. So there's 5 of us. So we had that confirmation that already he's one of them. So because I did think at the beginning of the series he could be Camel, the Eastern, and gets the he's the deputy Witch King, if you like, of the Nazgul. But also when he speaks to Gandalf, he says that he wants to. That there's a line in there about them ruling over Middle Earth after Sauron, which was one of Saruman's objectives. So I think he absolutely is Saruman. And I think, but I don't think they're going to tell us that for another 2 series or something, right? But I think it is Saruman. In terms of the Harfoots, so what's going to happen? Assuming the next series, so Nori and Poppy, they're taking, they might take the stores back to the Harfoot. They're the stores in this series, and the Harfoots in the last one. They might bring them together, and they go wandering together. And presumably, they're now going to go, let's say, a more foresty location and find the Falahides, who are the third group of hobbits, and collect them together. And then presumably, so what I wonder is if they will have some tangential role in the Battle of the Last Alliance in the 5th season, and then they get rewarded for that with Susa, which is the Shire, and that's kind of how that comes about at the end. I mean, the fact that we had the reference to the mythical Susa, which we know is the Shire, makes me think that we're absolutely going to end up in that place. So what I don't understand at the moment is how it fits in with the wider narrative. I think it's got to, otherwise it just looks completely ridiculous, really. So presumably there's going to be some tangential battle where these, the hobbits help in some way, and then they get rewarded with the land. What the curious thing for me is when do they get called hobbits? Right. So we have Harfoots and Scores. We'll get the Falahides, presumably the third group of hobbits. At what point do they get collected together as hobbits? And I don't know when that happens, but yeah, I think we can say season 5 they end up in the Shire. I presume in season 5 it gets kind of set up as almost like a pre-Lord of the Rings Shire as well, as opposed to the reality, which is just many thousands of years earlier. It's not going to feel like that, I don't think.
I'll opine. I think that it's going to be Tom Bombadil who leads in there. I think that's why they're in this sort of same area, and he's going to go back to the old forest, and he's going to take them on his merry way. And then he's probably going to be the one who sort of collectively decides to give him the name Hobbit.
So I was going to say one thing about Tom Bombadil. We mentioned about hats. Presumably Gandalf is going to steal his hat. Bombadil's hat looks very Gandalf hat, right? If you remember it. So presumably that's going to happen. There's going to be like a hat exchange. Gandalf's going to be like, "Oh, Tom Bombadil, you take the hobbits, I'll take your hat," or whatever. There's some. I feel like there's some relationship going to happen there. I mean, the idea about Tom Bombadil taking them to the Shire is not a bad one, actually.
It's actually maybe it's just a long-term loan. Like when Gandalf says at the end of Lord of the Rings that he needs to go see Tom Bombadil, he's like he's got to give him back his hat. He's borrowed it. We'll come back to Tom. It's the one part of Rune I sort of wanted to get to at the end. Let's move to Numenor real quick. I kind of want to go through this kind of relatively quickly because we got, I think, some more important shit to get to. But let's start with Eärien. Strider and I have talked plenty about Eärien, the two of us together. And I want to get really quick. Give me just a thumbs up or thumbs down on screen. Are you guys fans of the character and sort of what we're seeing here, or not so much? All right. All right. That's a more positive response than I thought it was going to be. So, Sean, just give me real quickly, what are the selling points of her to you?
So, she's humanizing Numenor, right? There is an element there, and she's representing the conflict. Now, one of my theories is that her and Kemen are going to die somehow, right? This is one of my theories. And the reason why I say this is because I think that at the moment we lack a catalyst for Numenor going to war with the Valar over their mortality, right? We need to get to that point and we're really far away from that currently. We need to force Pharazôn into that place, and I wonder if what's going to happen is somehow they're both going to die, and we're going to see the differing reactions of Elendil and Pharazôn. I mean, that's an alternative to them becoming like Nazgul, because that's also a possibility that I've considered. What I find frustrating about her is there's a lot of focus on her, way more focus than I think there should be compared with Miriel. Miriel seems to be not that prominent in the final episode at all, and I don't think I'm uncomfortable with that, if I'm honest. I feel like Miriel is a far more important character than this made-up Eärien. I don't mind Eärien, but I do like the fact she's representing that tension within Numenor, because actually what Tolkien, because he didn't write that much material about this, there would have been that tension within their society, right? We would have seen that tension between families, between businesses, between friends. She represents that well, and I think actually that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, Killian, I think have you read the Silmarillion all the way through?
Not yet. I have a beautiful copy that you gave me though for Christmas. Thank you very much. So I'm yet to open it yet though. I've tried to get into it a few times.
Yeah, this was, I promise, not me checking to see if you had read it.
There's a very clear note that says this doesn't mean you have to read this.
The reason I'm asking though is that I would assume that you haven't read the Akalabeth and thus really haven't read as much. Maybe read the appendices of Lord of the Rings, but you haven't read as much about sort of Numenor. As someone who's coming into this sort of storyline and world with maybe a little less fewer expectations about what it's supposed to look like. What has been your sort of take on the storyline and the way it's unfolded and sort of the dramatic sort of tension between these characters, coming in with fresher eyes, perhaps?
I wasn't a huge fan of it, actually. I thought it was quite the first season I was really like, every time it was on and I was just like, oh, for God's sake. And like it was funny, like at the start kind of being like, oh, like this is Numenor and all that. This is kind of exciting, but this season I tend to agree. It felt like a lot of like fluff and slow scenes that I didn't really like understand really. And then with like Sean was saying, like I found that like there was focus on, I guess I felt the wrong places, or the character arcs were given a lot of focus that I didn't feel like made sense to me within the larger arc of the narrative. I was kind of like confused, and I was like I often have found with the show, I'm surprised at what's being put on screen at that time. If we're building a story, like this feels like we're looking at the wrong place. So I kind of felt like that sometimes when watching it. But there was good, and it obviously adds a context and a background that you need for what's going on in Middle Earth at the time, and like the sort of conflict that's going on. Like it is there, and it did feel like you needed something there. But I found often when it was on, I was kind of like, this feels like we're not focusing on the right stories to build up where the sort of main action, I suppose, is going on.
That's really well put, I think. And Strider or Sean, would either of you like to sort of comment, jump off of that? Go ahead. Strider, was that a raising your hand or an offering to someone else?
To Sean.
I mean, fundamentally, I agree. The bit I'm struggling with in terms of character arcs is, how do we get to a point where Pharazôn wants to literally go to war with the Valar? Right, we seem to be so far away from that, and that theme of death and mortality, just we're not really seeing it anywhere near strongly enough. There's been a couple of hints of it, and it just feels. I want, in my head, I'm presuming season 3 is going to end with the ring. Season 4 is going to end with the fall of Numenor, and season 5 ends with the fall of Sauron at the Last Alliance. It feels like we've got a lot of development to get to the point where Numenor falls apart, and particularly if we're wasting time faffing about with hobbits, right? It just feels like we're losing a lot of screen time. You have to remember that this is, although I understand, and I think I broadly agree with the decision of the screenwriters to condense time, right? Time and space are irrelevant in this show, right? So, thousands of years count for nothing, as do thousands of miles, by the way. But that creates other problems, and Numenor is one of them, because this was a problem that built up over centuries that we're trying to deal with in a few hours, basically, of screen time. So that's I think how we get there with Numenor is going to be challenging, actually, and I suspect when we get to that point, I'm going to be struggling a little bit of quite how rapid that's going to feel.
Yeah.
But in particular, so I was going to say, is they had an opportunity here that they didn't take, which was they invented the weird storyline about Valar judging Miriel, fine. But when they apparently had made that judgment, they could have used that as part of the reason why the Valar are not looking fondly on them. That could have been the beginning of, like, the Valar made the wrong decisions. They're bad. We want to challenge it. They didn't take that opportunity, and I don't know why they didn't, because that felt like an obvious one to me.
Yeah. I'm just gonna say one more thing. We'll move on to the next section. But my sister was in town for my birthday this weekend, and so we watched episode 18.
Happy birthday!
Yeah, happy birthday, Gregory.
Oh, thanks, guys. And I was watching with my sister, and she was, one of my first Lord of the Rings pals. Watching it together when we were like 11 and 9 or whatever. And there was one moment in Numenor that made us both geek out. And as we were sitting next to each other on the couch, and that was seeing Narsil. And so I just want to put it out there to three of you. Feel free to talk to each other. Just give me your thoughts. What were your guys' reactions in that moment and with how that unfolded?
So I'll go first. I love seeing Narsil. I didn't love the way he drew the sword in the exact same way Aragorn did it in The Return of the King. I really could do without these really obvious callbacks to the Lord of the Rings films. I want this to stand on its own 2 feet, not copy what happened before. But apart from that, I like seeing the sword.
Yeah, I got to say I did like it too. I enjoyed it. I didn't mind the kind of, I guess because it is like there's an ancestral link, so I didn't mind the kind of but it was like almost the exact same. So it was very much a callback. But I did enjoy. I thought it was cool. Yeah, I did think it was cool.
Yeah, for me as well. I think there's definitely too many callbacks throughout the show so far. Definitely, whether it's a visual, it's like a scene or a moment or whatever, or most commonly lines that are like almost verbatim, often callbacks. But I feel like I didn't mind this one because of what was just said. Like Aragorn is meant to be, almost not really, but he is always constantly compared to being like the closest to Elendil of everybody who came before him. He is so cool. He's so wonderful. And he's so similar to Elendil. And it's like, so to have this very similar scene, I was like, okay, I don't like a lot of callbacks, but I can deal with this one. It was like, okay, fine. And also, yeah, just to have Narsil finally be where it belongs, where we've been waiting for it to be for the last 2 seasons, it's just good news, right? Definitely not what I expected from Elendil's storyline in the show, but I'm happy we are going into more canon stuff. And within the context of the show, I'm also interested to see what will reclaiming his lordship mean, and why does he have to reclaim it? It's a good teaser. So not a good lore thing, but within the context of the show, I'm looking forward to seeing how that pans out. And the fact that Narsil is there, it's just, what else can you ask for?
Yeah, and I'll agree. I think you said it really well, Strider. Someone else put it in the comments as well. Who was it? I'm trying to go. Charles Joshua. I think that Narsil Draw was the only decent callback to the films. For me, I agree. We could do with fewer, but that was one that, because of the connection, I actually didn't mind so much. Or we've got a super chat. Thank you, MK Matt. Do you think that the show will end with I assume the defeat of Sauron, or will they end it with Isildur's death? Maybe they do a spin-off for that stuff instead. I don't know. Yeah, Sean, it looks like you got a thought on that.
Yeah, so I hope it's neither. So my image I've always had for the final scene of the show is Isildur just holding the ring like that. And I think you should end at that. And maybe he could say the ring is mine, and just be like, and that's it, and just end at that point.
Sorry, I have to add to that. I agree and disagree. If we're gonna go with that, if we are gonna go with that, then it has to end with this shot of him saying no, and then you hear a voice from outside of the screen screaming Isildur, and then that's where we end.
Cool.
Well, you're saying it in Mount Doom, like do it there, where he's given the opportunity to, or right after he's chopped it off, like when he...
So I suspect not immediately after he's chopped off, not in Mount Doom either. I think it's almost got to be like he's in Minas Tirith or Minas Anor as it is at that point, just holding the ring, or even out in the woods before he's about to get killed by orcs for it potentially. He's just holding it and looking at it, and I think that's a much more powerful ending, and then that leads really nicely into the future storyline. I think if you end on Sauron's fall, I think it's a bit unsatisfying about what happens afterwards. Like, you do need a little bit of what happened to the world afterwards, because even with, like, you have that in Return of the King, but in like the Harry Potter films as well, you have that 19 years later with Harry Potter. I think you need to know what's the resolution. If you end with Isildur's death, that's also not a resolution in the same way. And it doesn't, this is fundamentally a story of good and evil, and actually people want to have mostly a nice ending, don't they? That's you watch these things for mostly a nice ending. So I don't think it's going to be too horrible. I think it's going to be a nice-ish ending.
I want to build off of the two of you guys were just saying. It could be really cool to end it with him in Minas Tirith and writing, even as I write, writing the letters fade. Like blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Hmm.
That'd be good.
I
That'd be
think
cool.
I think to end on a, I mean, the end of this show is going to be bittersweet. Like, there's no doubt about that. A lot of people will die in the last like 3 episodes of the show. Um, I think a way to kind of go through all of this, and then still end off on a slightly high note, even though it will be definitely very bittersweet, and I'm not sure if they can actually pull it off, but his son Valandil is the one who takes over after him. He's the heir. So I feel like maybe doing something with him where Elrond comes, because so canon wise, what happened was the youngest son of Isildur was left. The son was named Valandil. He was left in Rivendell, and he was like 3 years old or something like that. So maybe they changed up a bit, and his son is perhaps like a teenager or something. And he was left in Rivendell, and I feel like maybe Elrond comes and says, "Hey, it's now up to you," or something like, like ends with his crowning or something like that. I feel like there's room for a nice ending there. But we have another super chat from Joshua. Thank you very, very much. Here is a thought. Obviously, we will be seeing the Nazgul at one stage. Perhaps the Dark Wizard will actually become the Witch King of Angmar. So that should not be the case, even though it is a very popular theory. Dark Wizard, we have it confirmed now that he's one of the Istari,
Yes.
and as one of them, he will not be the Witch King of Angmar. So whether he is Saruman or a Blue Wizard or some, he just stays the Dark Wizard, he is one of the Istari. They do not become the Nazgul. So yeah, the Nazgul are all men of the race of men, and while Istari seem like it, they are not. They just have the body of men. So yeah, I don't think that will be happening.
Joshua, thanks
Thank
for
you very, very much for the super chat.
Yeah, thank you. Guys, we should move on, or we're going to be here all night long. Though this conversation has been inspired and very excellent. So let's move on to one of the most important parts of really. I think it seems like we all sort of agree with this, that the heart and soul of what this season has been, which is the relationship between Celebrimbor and Sauron, and the acting and also the storyline. For me, this has been one of the best parts of the show, and I'd love to, we'll dig into it. I'd love to hear all of your guys' thoughts on it. Well, first off, I assume let's talk about a pin-feathered Celebrimbor. Was it too on the nose for anyone else? The other sort of well-known death that it's sort of drawing inspiration from here. Let's start with you, Killian. What do you think?
Sorry, what are you referencing? A pin-feathered?
He looks a lot like Boromir in Fellowship. So another Lord of the Rings. It sort of, I think, goes to the theme that we've had of
Yeah.
service moments.
I obviously didn't see that.
Yes.
But I thought I did think this whole narrative was just really, really good, and I was kind of, I guess, a bit nervous. I think I'm always a bit nervous with sort of, I guess not humanizing, but like, yeah, I guess humanizing Sauron and seeing him, because he's almost like in the movies, and a lot of the time in the books, he's kind of this almost Jaws-like baddie who is you don't really see him, you just hear a noise, or he's spoken of, or you hear music, and that's sort of how, and he's not really speaking words, and you're not hearing anything about him. So it's kind of, I guess, that there's something really powerful in a villain who is not on screen, who's not really present. So when he was like being such a pivotal role and speaking so much dialogue and stuff, I was kind of nervous about how that would pan out. Would his scariness be less so? Would his power be kind of removed, because you kind of be like, oh, he's kind of he's kind of hot, and he's kind of charismatic and all this kind of stuff. But I thought they did it really, really well with this relationship, just showing how he can, kind of see exactly what people desire and kind of create a manipulate them perfectly, and the great deceiver and all that kind of stuff. And you almost see just quite how powerful he is from this whole kind of thing. And then having that moment at the end where he's like, you're a prisoner to the rings. I thought that was really, really good, because I don't know, we don't get to see that at all. And like it was really just great to see that on screen. I thought that was just a wonderful moment, and a very vindication for Celebrimbor, and then also like a kind of a moment for Sauron to kind of contemplate his relationship with this thing that he's created or whatever. I thought it was just really beautiful, all of that. It was brilliant.
Yeah, and I want to draw attention to what Julia says here about the dialogue. And I think we've started to see this over the last few episodes with this relationship between them. I think it's been just for a show that has suffered a lot from bad or cheesy or obvious writing in certain areas. The dialogue between these two, I think, has really become really, really, really good. Strider, I kind of want to have you bounce off of what Killian was saying. This element of Sauron being a prisoner of the ring, Celebrimbor saying, one alone shall prove your utter ruin. Is he foreshadowing Frodo, or what do you think about this in terms of like the lore and the way, is this appropriately done in terms of how they're setting this all up? Did it work for you? Yeah. What are your thoughts?
So I'll just quickly go a little bit backwards and say, so actually in the books lore, actually, this is what happens to Celebrimbor. He is put on a spear, paraded in front of Sauron's armies as they ravage across Eregion, and he is full of orc arrows. So actually, this opening of the episode was a direct reference to that. Whether we will see Celebrimbor on a spear paraded as a banner in front of the army in season 3, that's a different question. But this was actually definitely a huge nod and like huge shout out to this big lore thing that happened. Even though it's like one line in the whole book, it's this famous line. So I feel like this is what they were aiming for. Any likeness to Celebrimbor is accidental. Nothing is intentional. But as for the foretelling of the one will be your doom and all of that, I feel like actually, so maybe we'll just do the super chat first. Sorry, Charles, Joshua. Do we think we'll see a prosthetic Celebrimbor as a banner? So yeah, who knows? We might. But as for the dwarves, is Durin's brother possibly in the first? Leslie Rian definitely. Rian definitely got Boromired. I think we'll probably mention her at some point. But as for Durin's brother, I think maybe we can discuss that at the end of the episode when we reach that scene. But I don't know. I think it's a really good question. I didn't expect them to go all Dwarven Civil War or something like that. But just to go quickly to Gregory's question before maybe we go further into this, it's a very common trope in Tolkien. I mean, very common. There's definitely a couple of instances in Tolkien where a character is dying, and as they're dying, they have this gift of foresight, and they do foretell something that does come to pass. So Fëanor, as he lays dying, mortally wounded, he sees the fortress of Morgoth, and with his dying foresight, it is said that he, with the foresight of a dying man, he knows that no might of Noldor will ever bring them down. And there's a couple other instances. So I feel like that was really a wonderful scene, even though there's no dialogue between Celebrimbor and Nanatar in the books.
Yeah.
At least not this like farewell dialogue. Celebrimbor going out like this felt really on point, really Tolkien in every sense, and Charles Edwards absolutely nailed it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I want to flip this over to the other side, to the Sauron side of things for you, Sean. I've seen a couple people in the comments talking about Sauron's crying and maybe feeling disconcerted about it or something. I'll tell you, just it worked for me, but I really want to hear your thoughts. We're getting a Sauron here that, we've seen that in the last episode, he's been beaten and abused and tortured by Morgoth. That's pretty canon. And we're getting a lot more of really sort of psychological and interesting sort of depth of character of this eternal Maya. And I can understand why some people will be put off by the crying elements. He's also, a lot more of a fully fleshed out character here. For you, do you think that this fits within specifically the context? Oh, I'd love to hear whether you just liked it in terms of the show, but I also want to know, does it work for you specifically in the context of, I guess, what you would imagine the professor to have sort of thought about this character?
So I probably don't think, and there's that super chat I definitely want to answer when I finish this. I don't think Tolkien would have imagined Anatar / Sauron crying at this point, but actually it worked for me as well. So what we're seeing here, this is a very complex character we've got, and actually, frankly, these two characters have held up this whole series. Without them, it would have been such a worse series without them. Right? They are the out and out stars. What we got with Anatar / Sauron here is, he is someone who he believes in his heart he can heal Middle Earth, right? And unfortunately, he's also someone that appears to believe that the ends justifies the means. But that doesn't necessarily mean he has to like the means, right? So here, the ends justify the means. He's got to take. Celebrimbor is not helping him. In fact, he's in the way. Actually, got obstructing him. He's going to take him out. But it doesn't mean he has to be happy about it. I also agree with Killian's point about sorry, I agree with Strider's point about characters sort of prophesizing. I think that was a really moving moment, because actually one of the things I don't think we have from Tolkien, and I'll try and remember it as we were talking, is within the narrative of the story, where does the name The Lord of the Rings come from? Well, I don't think that's actually defined. We know that Sauron inscribes it on the ring. We know that it's in the verse. We don't know the origin of it. So actually, they created the origin of that name for him there, which I quite like. We've got a great super chat here that I do want to answer, King of Moorland, because I think it's a really cracking question, which I know Corey Olsen has taken a lot of flack for online, which is there such a thing as canon in Tolkien? And the answer is ish. Right, ish is the answer. So I said that there's a famous quote from a Tolkien scholar which says, "There are Tolkien's best thoughts, there are Tolkien's final thoughts, and there are Tolkien's published thoughts, and they are not necessarily the same thing." And so, as a really good example of this, what is canon in the story of Galadriel and Celeborn? None of us can say so, because Tolkien changed his mind. There's various versions of it. Now, I don't think using the phrase canon is very helpful at all, actually, because of the nature of Tolkien, it is very poorly defined. I think you can talk about published text, you can talk about primary text, secondary text, etc. I don't think canon is the best way of describing it. I mean, not only that, but it keeps changing. So for instance, in The Lord of the Rings and Unfinished Tales, we're told that the Astari arrived in Middle Earth in the 10th century of the Third Age, and yet in the Nature of Middle Earth, we're told that they arrived with the awakening of the elves many millennia beforehand. So that it's. I don't think the phrase canon is a helpful phrase. I think you also have to remember that Tolkien himself, he was wrestling with a lot of ideas. He was changing his mind. He was obsessed with consistency. He was obsessed with it. But the problem was that he could not find consistency in what he created. So he kept changing things and alter things. So it's a great question, which is almost impossible to answer, apart from saying the word ish. There is canon ish.
Yeah, and I really like that comment we just had on screen, Stanley's comment. There's strict canon for The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, but loose canon for everything else. We should again, just because we got a lot to get to, we probably should move on. Though we could talk about this forever. I just want to draw attention to the fact that he did say the thing. He actually said The Lord of the Rings, which we don't necessarily have to talk about it. I just thought it should put a pin in the fact that the thing was said that moment. Is there anything else? I mean, this is such an important and sort of central part of this. Is there anything about this that you guys think that we should cover that we haven't yet, or any other comments that you guys want to add on?
Yeah, so I've got one which relates to the earlier question. He was killed finally by a spear. So in the Unfinished Tales, we're told that when Celebrimbor's body was born as a banner in the front of Sauron's armies, it was held up by a spear. So presumably that's why they've ended it this way, either as a little nod to the fans or because that will be what happens next in the next series.
And I think I saw something about Carly Vickers wanting to parade Celebrimbor through the streets. So I guess we'll find out very soon into probably the first episode of the next season.
Not very soon though. 2 years from now.
Yeah. All right, let's chat briefly about Pelargir. I just want to. This is another thing that's pretty much only in show, and we're getting Theo. There's a lot of sort of theories about who Theo's going to be. Do any of you guys have anything like in particular that sort of stood out to you? Killian, I see you shaking your head, so I'm going to make you just come up with one.
Well, I like he must be someone. He seemed to really give him a lot of focus and stuff like that. But I had no idea who he could possibly be. Yeah.
I have to say I don't really care for the Pelargir storyline or for Theo. My assumption is, Killian, that Theo either takes a ring later on, or he ends up becoming the King of the Dead. Those are my two theories. But yeah, I agree with you. He's got to matter somewhere. I just don't know what it is yet. But yeah, I'm presuming he's going to end up taking a ring somewhere along the line.
I think the King of the Dead theory is the one that I've sort of become the biggest fan of, because the 9 are supposed to be given to Kings of Men, which Theo is not. So but him becoming the leader of the Low Men of Pelargir could, and I could see that happening anyway.
And the relationship with Isildur there as well. There's kind of, I mean, that was
Well, I mean, that's actually what I was going to ask next. Do you think that that's a relationship we're going to see building forward over the next few seasons? Like we see, this ends with Isildur leaving. I'm curious. You can. This is sort of two-parter. Give us your thoughts on both. When he comes back, which we know that he eventually will, do you think that they're going to pick up the Estrid and Isildur storyline and that sort of relationship thing? And how do you think that sort of friendship he's building with Theo is going to factor going forward?
Sorry, is that for me or for Killian?
That was for Killian. That's for Killian.
Oh, sorry, me. Oh, sorry. I thought it was someone else. Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it feels like, I don't know. It feels like they're probably going to have to focus a lot more on what's going on with Isildur and that whole thing. So I don't know if it might be something that they come back to later, but I feel like that felt like a goodbye. That felt like a very awkward whole goodbye, and I don't know if there's really going to be much interaction between the two of them. Maybe some in a distant time, but I kind of felt like a closing of that chapter or something like that. I don't know if they will, and I kind of don't know if I see him having another wrestling with sort of morality or something like that. I think he already had his moment of kind of questioning if he's good or evil or something like that, and he's kind of set that path. So I feel like him getting a ring is maybe an unlikely direction. I feel like maybe King of the Dead is probably more likely, in which case I don't know if we're going to see that much more of him. Maybe we will, but I don't know. It's like it's with the writing, it feels like he's going to be someone important, but with this show sometimes that's not really lead you down roads where you kind of where you're like, oh, that must be the case, and then it's kind of like, oh, well, maybe it's not the case, and then suddenly they're like, oh yeah, it is the case. So I don't know with him.
What about you, Strider?
As Charles says here, not all they were necessarily kings. They were mighty among men, so some of them for sure were kings, but some of them were lords and so on. So I think what Sean said, that those are probably two likeliest options. I mean, either King of the Dead, one of the Nazgul, or as someone said in the chat, he might just end up being like one of the first lords of Gondor when Isildur comes back with Anarion. That's also one option, but I do think if I had to make a bet, I would say he might end up being one of the Nazgul. And the reason why is because at some point it is said, I can't remember where, I think it's Gandalf at some point, maybe during the Council of Elrond in the books, but it is said that when the rings were given to the 9 of 9 men, depending on how strong they were at the time that they were given the ring and what their intentions were like, sooner or later, depending on these factors, they fell under the power of the One Ring. So what I'm thinking is that can very easily mean that some of the good-natured people, good-intentioned people, like Celebrimbor himself, he was also tricked in a way. I feel like some of the good people could be corrupt in the sense that they're given the ring, and once they get the ring, their downfall starts. So I think Theo might be a setup for a really huge heartbreak 2 seasons down the line, where we see his fall through the corruption of the ring. Because, we see him here, and I have to say, by the end of this second season, I kind of started caring about him. Like, this last episode for me kind of made me like, okay, I kind of like Theo at this point. Not super a lot, but I kind of care about him. So I feel like if they keep doing some things with him, if he gets, to rebel against these Kemen's Numenorians, against Kingsman and so on, we could start caring about him a lot, and then we could just see his downfall when he accepts the ring. Perhaps when Anatar or Halbrand, when Halbrand maybe shows up and says, hey, maybe this will help you protect your people against the Numenorians or something like that. I feel like that could be like a story going on there.
Well, since and I can't believe I'm saying this, Isildur is a relatively small storyline in Rings of Power. I want to move on to some of the other stuff that we probably need to spend a little more time on. But before we do, I have one more question about Kemen, or as I've been calling him, Draco Baratheon. And this is for you, Sean. He's a non-canon character. He's the son of a very important character. And he's now in Middle-earth. And we do know that, some of the Nazgul are Black Numenorians and stuff like this. It also could not go that direction at all. What do you think of this character? I guess, what are your thoughts on the character in general? But where do you, I guess more importantly, where do you think we're going? Like, it seems like he's playing this really sort of important role. Do you think they're doing something bigger with him, or is he just going to sort of be at some point, get his comeuppance for what he did to Valandil?
So, I mean, first of all, what I think of the character is what everybody thinks, which is, right, I hate him. He's designed to be hated, right? He's really irritating, which is what he's there for. It's either one of two things, right? So Kemen is he's either going to become one of the Nazgul, or he's going to be dead, right? And my right, that he doesn't exist for any other purpose. So ultimately speaking, what we are finding out, so one of the things we need to be aware of is that the invented characters, the showrunners are finding them relatively disposable. So they're not holding on to them. So Kemen will be disposed of at some point. Now either that's disposed of to die as a to cause heartbreak to Pharazôn, so he wants to go to war with the Valar, or he's disposed of by becoming a Nazgul. I'm not entirely sure if we're going to see Nazgul by the end of the 5th series, but that seems to feel like that's going to take a lot of time to get to that. So my money's more on the fact that he's going to just be dead, and that's going to that heartbreak is going to then be like from Pharazôn is going to be like, we need to take on the Valar. Our mortality is what's the problem here. Their ban on us is the problem. I feel like it's a motivation for him. I could be wrong. It's like, is that, or he's going to become a Nazgul? I mean, otherwise, why focus as much on him as we have done? He's got to go. He's got to go somewhere. It's either because he's going to be just generic evil guy, or I'm becoming a man of school, or Paul Farrell from Heartache.
Yeah. Well, let's move on because we got a really important thing that we got to talk out. Let's get to Galadriel and Adar and Sauron and all that good stuff. Which I think, I don't know about you guys. For me personally, this is the other part of this episode that I thought was really done tremendously. Since season 1, the relationship between Adar and Galadriel has been one of my favorite parts of this show. And it starts here in this episode with her turning herself in, and she has the 9. And we will get to in just a moment what happens to Adar in this scene. But I want to know, what do you guys think Galadriel's thinking as she bargains her life for the lives of these other elves? Adar's been attacking the city. What's going through her head that she says, I'm going to take the 9 rings to this guy? Like, is she already sort of thinking ahead, or what's going on? Let's start with you, Strider. What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure what the plan here was. I guess she was just trying to buy the time for the refugees, however few they were. I think, how do I put this in English? I feel like having the 9, I feel like they were not completely sure what to do with the 9. Like this pouch with the 9 rings moving around the plot, it's like I feel like they weren't completely sure maybe what's the best way to go about it. So it's kind of like going here, going there, and then ends up here because we know what Sauron has to get them. I'm not sure what was going on there. I guess maybe she could have been hoping that Adar would be open for negotiating and just like, hey, these are evil or whatever. Can I keep them? I'll happily destroy Sauron. We'll just we'll try to figure out whatever is the best way to handle the rings. I guess that's what she was hoping for.
Yeah. I see a comment from Charles Joshua. I really wish Adar would have dropped his real name. That's actually a really nice segue into the next thing I wanted to bring up. He's talking to Galadriel, and he turns around, and we see this beautiful elf, right? And he doesn't drop his real name. And I just want to shout out, sorry to disagree with you, Charles. I personally really like that. And I was sort of thinking along the lines of what our guest last week, Robert from In Deep Geek, said, which is that by making this nameless elf that was twisted by Morgoth, he is, it makes the universe bigger. Not everyone needs to be some named character or the 8th son of Feanor or whatever the case may be. And I thought that was actually a really nice touch, and especially the way the dialogue in particular. So I wanted to shout out Robert last week for making a comment on that. But let's talk about this reveal and him turning around and sort of what happens here. And Killian, I just want to get your just general thoughts on this scene and the relationship between these characters and sort of how this sort of relationship unfolds. And let's bring it up until the wounded orc is brought in. Before that, when we have these two, what are your thoughts cinematically, story-wise, acting, all that good stuff?
Yeah, well, I think that the Galadriel bringing the rings to sort of plea with him or make a deal with him is a nice way of kind of paralleling the two characters, in that she has her people that she's caring about and would do anything for, and then Adar on his side has that same kind of thing going on. So I think that the rings being there served a kind of useful thing, in that she was making a plea, because there's a lot of parallels between the two of them, really. And I really, I get one part of the series that I thought was really good was this whole kind of question of like, do orcs have feelings and that kind of thing. And I really liked that. I thought it was done really, really well. And that, I guess Adar, in his kind of search to, protect people, goes to methods that eventually lead to, I guess, them turning against him. Or is it just Sauron kind of deceives the orcs into going against him? But in that scene there, like there's something nice in Galadriel that she doesn't like, she doesn't just look at people as like good and evil. She tries to. There's an element of understanding people, and I think that speaks very well to her. I mean, obviously, that must be what makes her susceptible to being, taken under Sauron's kind of cloak. But like in this, she kind of really seems to see him and not view him as this sort of big kind of. Obviously, he has a beautiful, nice, fucking, very beautiful, like makeup face. So it's very easy to see him as like, you know, an elf or whatever. But when he, you know, gives her the ring, I thought that was a really, really nice moment of like, you know, not that, oh, he's a good guy or whatever, but that he's a very complex, rich character that you know, you really just identify with. And anytime he's on screen, I think he really, because there's such a depth there and a conflict, and you know, you're almost conflicted because you're looking at this person who's leading this group of people who are traditionally the baddies in this sort of story, and you're kind of like going, oh, he's kind of doing the honorable right thing or whatever. So there's a conflict within you, the viewer, as well. And I think it was really a challenging, great character in the whole thing. And this scene was, yeah, it was really, really nice.
Yeah. I want to get your take on this too, Sean. You know, we're dealing with some stuff outside of what we've really seen prior in anything from, you know, in the world of Tolkien. And I know you said at the beginning that this, you know, you really liked this. He's probably your favorite character. How do you feel like it reconciles with sort of, you know, Tolkien's own thoughts about the problem of orcs and morality and stuff like that? And what does this character, do you think, do for the show that, you know, and maybe contrast it with the Jackson trilogy?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges that we've often had with Tolkien, lots of people have with Tolkien, is that orcs are just mindless baddies, they're purely to be killed, right? And that's often how they come across. There's never any sense that these are a people. And this obviously led to accusations of racism in Tolkien's works, etc. And, you know, Tolkien himself, he himself questioned this. He questioned whether the orcs were just, you know, mindless idiots there to be killed. And that's why later in life, there was this whole debate of what's called the irredeemability of orcs, right? Are they redeemable or not? What happens if they don't have a guiding evil hand on them? What do they want? And actually, when you read The Lord of the Rings, and in particular, for anybody who's read the parts of The Return of the King where Sam puts the ring on and hears the conversations between the orcs, you realise these are far more humanity to them than we give them credit. And I feel like this show and Adar has done a really good job of demonstrating that these are a legitimate people with a right to exist. And actually, you know, that's what Adar's fighting for, isn't it? He's fighting for, he believes he is fighting for his people and the right for them to exist. And I thought it's very authentically Tolkienian. And as I said in the after show, this is they talked to, you know, David Payne and Patrick about this, and they said that they had planned for Adar to exit much earlier, but Simon Tolkien himself had asked for it to play on. It more merits his character. And I agree. I think the character was authentically Tolkienian. We're told orcs came from the corruption of elves. I don't agree. I wish I had a prologue for Adar. I'd like to know his backstory. I would like to know, actually, are the children literal or metaphorical? For instance, I would like to know about his own family and his own relationships. I would like to learn about that. I would like to learn, you know, we've had this hint about what sort of elf he is as well. I would like to think more about that context of it and actually contextualized with his relationship with Morgoth. He had a relationship with Morgoth back in the First Age, and how that contrasts with Sauron's relationship with Morgoth.
That's really interesting. This is a really good point. And, you know, let's get to his death now. It was such a sad death. I mean, and you know, it was really, I think, really cinematically well done, the way they mirrored Sauron's death in episode 1 and everything, which in of itself, I'm pretty sure they're paying homage to Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
But I want to get your thoughts, Strider. This is a really interesting question from Otaku, and I saw that you already put a response, but I want to give you a little space to elaborate on it a little bit. Otaku asked, "Do you think Stradar's or Adar's went to the halls of Mandos?" And just for context, right? This is a really interesting question because if you, well, I'll let you talk about it, Strider.
Yeah, so it's the big question. Like, does he still count as an elf, or is he an orc, or like is he an Uruk by choice, or that like does he still count as an elf? And if he does, well, then his soul would go to Halls of Mandas. But I feel like I like to think wherever his soul went, he has some reprieve. He has some nice time in that the rest of eternity, because he definitely deserved it with everything he went through and all the sacrifices he made. And yeah, he was definitely he from his side definitely had a noble cause worthy of some peace in the afterlife. However, like it would be really nice to imagine that he's chilling in Valinor, that he's maybe chilling with Celebrimbor, and like who knows who else he got reunited with, like perhaps some of his old family from who knows when he awoke or was born. But I feel like he would, if given the choice to go to Valinor, or if we assume that the souls of orcs, also if we assume that they have these souls, another thing that Tolkien struggled with. Let's say orcs go somewhere else. I feel like Adar would choose to go wherever orcs go, even if given the chance to go with the elves.
That's
Yeah, it's a really good question. And
that
it's and the thing is, we can only have canon it, and whatever it is, I just hope he's having a nice time wherever he is.
That was so lovely. Him going to where the orcs are. Oh, Strider, that's really nice. I want to draw one more attention to one aspect of this, right? So, okay, let's start with this. He says, "I forgive you" to Galadriel, and I think it's probably Quenya, right? Not Sindarin. Sean, help me out. Was it Quenya?
I actually can't remember. I didn't. I was clearly not paying enough attention. I suspect it was probably Quenya because in the past, I've always spoken in Quenya.
Yeah. That was my thought, but I don't speak it, so I have to ask the experts. And I'm always reminded of this. I always use Black Panther, the movie Black Panther, for this example. In good writing, when you have a protagonist-antagonist relationship, what you really want when the protagonist if you're having a traditional storyline, the protagonist overcomes the antagonist, is that the antagonist has a strongly held point of view that's not wrong. Maybe their actions come out of it in a misguided way, but then the protagonist takes on, in their defeating the antagonist, that the knowledge of that the antagonist had that was important for them to learn. And I bring up Black Panther because that's what happens with Black Panther. When Killmonger had like a legitimate point of view. And anyway, I bring this up because I want to get your take on this, Killian. How do you think that this is going to affect Galadriel's character going forward? We've seen people struggle with Galadriel being too angry or perhaps a little two-dimensional in the earlier seasons. And this character, who is really her big antagonist in the first 2 seasons now, she's not the one who, in a sense, overcomes him, but he dies at this moment that her adversary has forgiven her. What do you think changes for her character going forward and for the show as a whole?
Yeah, well, I mean, just on what you were saying about Galadriel's character, big ups to Harry for choosing that still shot there. Like I mean, purposefully put in a shot of her giving a big toothy smile. I can't remember. I think it was in episode 2, and it actually looked really wrong. I was like, this actually looks odd seeing her smile like this. So I don't know. I mean, it does feel like at the end of the show, which maybe we'll get to in a bit, it kind of indicated that there's a sort of change in Galadriel, and that she's kind of going to maybe, let's say, look at different methods or something like that, and rather than being this single-minded, fight, I need to get to the I have a single issue person. She seems a little bit like changed by the end, and I kind of I think that maybe she's gonna be more Elrond-esque or something like that, or be more about creating. Obviously, like the end is like the big sword, and it's going to be like there is going to be a big fight, but maybe she won't be she'd be a bit more wiser, a bit more thoughtful. Maybe those kinds of things will come into her. Hopefully, I don't know, because like a bit more depth to her would be great, and I think this was a real opportunity to do that, and it did make me like her a lot more.
Strider, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wanted to say, well, as for Galadriel, so then two things. As for Galadriel, I do think we got a couple of moments with her this season that are already pointing towards this next level in the stage of the show Galadriel, which is when she held out Arondir from going after Adar, when she says there's a dearth of elven heroes tonight. You do not have to join them. That was a Galadriel moment. And also, I think like we'll come to it at the end of the episode. It feels like we see her starting a new stage in her journey throughout the show, but we'll get to that later. But I wanted to give a quick shout out to Jessica, who keeps firing away absolute fire comments week in, week out on our streams. And I love this so much. So she says regarding Adar, he redeemed himself by giving up the ring, offering his forgiveness, choosing and loving his children even through their betrayal. And that's extremely well put as always. And this also goes under the radar because so many things happened, and also I kind of forgot about it. But giving up the ring, it's a huge thing in Tolkien when someone is actually able to give up the ring willingly. Usually it's with the One Ring, but still to give up a ring of power of your own volition, just here you go. Mm-hmm. That's a huge thing, and this is a very understated thing that Adar does here. So just want to point all of that out.
Especially if it gives you the facelift that it gave him, I mean, he had that.
Right? It's an extra level of sacrifice.
Let's we're like an hour and a half in, so let's move the train forward. We got to talk about Sauron and Galadriel. There's a sort of a pretty significant sword. Is this the first like real sword fight we've seen in earnest between two characters of any sort of depth? Right? I don't know. I think there were some really wonderful things about this, and maybe some stuff that wasn't as great. I want to get your guys' thoughts. Let's start with the fan servicey comments. If there was one place where we start to see a lot of them, it's here, right? Like we get Sauron saying, the road goes ever on and on. Not even I see all its paths. It's a sort of a mixture of two things. Now, the Peter Jackson trilogy did this too. A lot of people, I think, forget that the opening monologue from Galadriel is actually Treebird's words. What do you guys think of the way they've sort of incorporated this? Like, is it all bad? Are you guys fine when it's done in a more tasteful way? Do you wish they'd scrap it as a whole? Sean, what are your thoughts?
Scrap it. I find it quite irritating. I mean, Peter Jackson, he had a habit of taking people's lines and giving them to other characters, repurposing them. And apparently, this show has a habit of repurposing the lines that Peter Jackson repurposed. It just needs to stop. I don't know who they're doing it for, right? Because at this point in the show, right? So maybe at the beginning of the season one, you're trying to convince lay fans or Tolkien fans that this is the same universe, right? We're 2 seasons in now. We don't need that convincing anymore, right? It's not doing anything for me. I don't think it's doing anything for anybody else. Apart from everybody else, if they think we all go, oh, he said the miners got the other things. We don't do that, right? I just want them to Like the whole copy and pasting thing. That's good. I just want that to stop. I don't want to have it again.
So what you're saying is that for you, the door is shut.
Yeah, I'm honestly, I just don't think it's working. I just don't think it's working at all. You know, because the other thing is, the Lord of the Rings films had lots of quotable and memeable content. We're not getting it from this show in the same way because they're just copying and pasting things from elsewhere. Like, you know, would it have been so much more satisfying if Sauron had his own significant line to say at that point, but they didn't do it. I'm just, honestly, you can tell I'm absolutely not on the fence on this. I really, really want them to stop copying and pasting stuff from the previous films. I don't want any of these callbacks. I want this to be its own show on its own merits and to stand up on its own.
All right. Well, I'm also gonna. I think the joke I just made fell flat, so I'm gonna call it out anyway because I liked it. I said the door is shut, which is the line they say in this, which was. Okay, cool. Just we
knew it. We heard it.
All right. All right, so it was just. I want to double check it was a bad joke and not that it wasn't heard. I got my answer.
Just to confirm, Gregory, I'm not a big fan of the callbacks. So I just get over it.
Real meta there for but there was a comment. I think you put it up a little bit before, Harry, that it looked amazing from beginning to end. And yeah, I want to get your thoughts on this, Killian. In terms of just the sword play itself, it was giving me a little bit of the vibes of Amon Hen in The Fellowship. What did you think of this, just the battle between the two of them? Like, did it feel like it lived up to sort of what we've been waiting to see between these two characters, or were you hoping for something different?
It was good, I guess, because you have that whole kind of, I guess, Sauron, in the show, he's really like, he has a desire to kind of do stuff with Galadriel. He's still keeping the door open to her because he has this idea that he's not like an evil guy. He wants to create this perfect world, and anything bad that he does, it's not what it's the means to a better thing. So he's offering her this I guess like this queen. He wants her to be his his partner in crime or whatever. So I guess there was that whole kind of drama going on and the sword fighting and everything like that. You do kind of have the feeling that like at any moment though he should be able to just like blast her away. Like he's far more powerful than her. I know she's got the ring on, but like it feels like I don't know. It felt like sometimes I was kind of thinking that I was like, oh, like could he not just destroy her? And then the shape shifting stuff, I also was like, I didn't know if that was that great, but I did like how it ended. I did like some of the dialogue. I think that like throughout the show that the dialogue is kind of one of the less strong parts of it. It's incredibly predictable because you've heard a lot of it before. It doesn't feel like things that people would say. I think that's what maybe like Peter Jackson's the dialogue in that is very like stuff that we would understand to be like stuff that people would actually say, and it's kind of more believable dialogue. Whereas in this, I feel like they speak in sort of monologue-y kind of verse, and it's not very engaging for people, and it feels a little bit outside. Where the hobbits aren't like that, but they're their own different kind of problems there. So I do find that sometimes with Galadriel, especially, speaks in these kind of monologue-y kind of things. So I always feel a little bit outside of it. But the sword fighting was class, and it was cool to see a sword. Always, especially with the crown. I thought that was cool. A cool way to get stabbed.
Well, a quick thought on that crown, and I want to go to you on this, Sean. What does the role of Morgoth's crown play in this? I mean, you can touch on the aspect of it, the collar and stuff if you want, or not. I don't. That's up to you. But I'm just. Do you think that? And then, of course, it gives this wound to her. It seems almost like a parallel to the wound that Frodo gets from the Witch King, but maybe of a magnitude of a higher order. But Galadriel is a stronger entity. What are your thoughts on Morgoth's crown being used in this show, and particularly in this way?
So I mean, it was like the Black Breath. That impact it had on her seemed to be very similar. Although, curiously, she she managed to survive that, a stab wound, the black breath through the heart, and falling off a cliff, right? So, those rings are doing a hell of a lot of work now. They seem that there's a separate problem, right? Which is those rings are almost becoming a bit too powerful now. So, we didn't touch on it earlier. Same with the Dark Wizard. Like, what were those Jedi powers all about? Like, we need to that's problematic, right? Because actually, if they got weirdly strong powers, you sort of think they should be able to deal with Sauron really easily, right? But aside from that, I mean, the crown itself, they haven't done anything with it. That's the thing I find really strange. It's that whole thing about Chekhov's gun, right? They've got to do something with it. Why is it hanging around? And I don't, unless they think it is some kind of symbol of authority. But as far as I can tell, within the context of the show, it's not been imbued with any special power. It doesn't seem to have any function apart from a purely symbolic one, from what I can tell. The bit I found odd, and the thing I was expecting, was for Sauron to place it upon his own head. I thought we were going to get that at the end of the episode, and I was surprised that didn't happen, and I don't really know why.
Oh, that's a really good point. The only thing I just want to add on really quick, one thing I really liked that, we've talked a lot about the acting of Charlie Vickers in relation to Celebrimbor, but the moment when he does his shape-shifting Sauron thing, and we see him as Halbrand, and then obviously, Morfydd Kark plays Galadriel, and Charles Edwards plays Celebrimbor, but when he plays Halbrand, this brief moment here, I really felt like it was a different person, a different actor, and to do that in that sort of just minute moment and then come back, like, it really showed the starkness of the contrast of the two characters and reminded me how well he's sort of executed this performance.
It was Lindsay Lohan in Freaky Friday levels of, I really believe this is, it was amazing. I think like his acting throughout the show.
I wouldn't go that far. Well, again, we're going to wrap up in, 10, 15 minutes because we've been going quite a lot. There are a couple things I want to get to still, but since this is such an important thing, is there anything else about these characters that you guys want to touch on, since this is so central to the show? Sauron and Galadriel and what's going on in these scenes right here. Well, okay, we covered it. We got. There should be no more debate about this at all online because we did it right. Okay, let's talk really briefly. The one thing I'll say about this, let's go to talking about Gil-galad and her being healed with Elrond and stuff. The only thing I want to point out, she survives like 100-foot fall, and they're worried about her chest getting stabbed. I'm assuming. Did you guys catch anything? Did I miss anything? Did she get like her fall broken by a branch, or are we just supposed to?
It was a tree kind of thing.
She did. They show that she lands on a tree, and the how do you call it? The head of the tree keeps going.
Obviously, that would completely break the fall, and you'd be grand. I don't know if you know that, but physically.
But at least they do make a point of showing it. Whether that's completely enough to bend the logic, fine. But it's the
same way that a few stones.
But they do make a point to show it.
In the same way that Arondir got a lot better by having a week off in between episodes. But so I want to go to this next scene and what we're seeing with it's a big moment. Elrond puts on the ring because he realizes he can help fall. And Sean, I just want to give me a summary of what you think is happening here and how you think this was handled. They're around this new glade. They mentioned that it has elven protection. Elrond is now more comfortable with the rings, which has sort of been one of his sub arcs of this season. And then Gil-galad is now, unable to heal, but then able to with the help of Elrond. What do you think about all this? And sort of, again, let's relate it to sort of how it pertains to both canon, but also how it works on its own.
Yeah. So first thing that I love, and which is canon, if you want to use that term, is that clearly this is Rivendell, right? Clearly this is Rivendell. That's where they've ended up. That shot at the very end of the scene where they're looking down the valley, that this is setting us up for the beginning of season 3 for the foundation of Rivendell. So, and that does happen at this point in the story. And it was founded by Elrond from the survivors from Eregion as part of after the fall of Eregion. So that it's absolutely is a legit canon event here. And I'm here for it because frankly I haven't got a lot of those. So I'm like, that's great. I think we got a really interesting character development with Elrond. He started off season 1 being quite a positive character, positive about the future, positive about the world. He then's got a bit more jaded as time moves on, and actually is the ring taking him out of that. And I think it's going to be an interesting character development with him when he comes to learn that clearly his ring will have a connection to Sauron's One Ring. That this moment was clearly the moment where he decided to trust Galadriel and to trust her ring. Now, up until this point, he didn't, and now he goes, you know what? I know I trust this ring. I trust I can use its power. I trust I can do good with it. I trust what Galadriel has done here. And for me, I think we're seeing that growth of Elrond as a character. The start of season 1, he didn't look like an elf lord capable of ruling over Rivendell. He very much does look like he's morphing into that now, doesn't he? So I think of all the elves, Elrond is my favourite. I think they've done a really good job with him. I know he gets a lot of criticism having short hair, which, by the way, there's no evidence in Tolkien's works that elves cannot have short hair. Tolkien never says that. Just anybody who's about to starting to go at me, they can have short hair. For me, Elrond is the best elf we've got, and I think the character development of him is excellent. And we're going to see more of that, right? We're going to later on see what happens when he realizes the ring. There's problems with it, right? Then that they can perceive Sauron, and Sauron has an element of power over them when they've got their rings.
Yeah, it is cool that we're seeing them find Rivendell, but in doing so, I think they missed a moment, an opportunity. Galadriel wakes up; she's being healed from this poisoned blade, and guess who is by her side and not standing over her is Gil-galad. That should be Elrond. Not just because it would be such a callback and maybe even an appropriate one to the Rivendell scene in Fellowship, but because he becomes the Lord of Rivendell.
Are you trying to hurt me?
You should have had them all floating in, in white cloaks. I think
why not have Gandalf there as well? Why not have her ask her what day is it? And he goes, oh, it's the morning of 24th of October. Why not? Let's just go the whole hog.
Galadriel wakes up and asks what the date is. Yeah,
I mean, I gotta say, for me, this scene was great. One of the, as I said, Gil-galad had a couple of 2-3 great moments in this episode. The dwarves when the dwarves are coming over, that was a great moment. And this scene here, the little bit of sass that he gives to Galadriel. I was just getting used to having some peace in your company. That was just really, really good stuff.
That was good.
So I would not change anything in the scene, honestly. It was spot on.
What were you saying, Killian?
Well, I agree. I thought that was quite good dialogue. I think there hasn't been enough of that kind of stuff, of little, snarky kind of, stuff that makes you believe that these people are actually in each other's company all the time and they make quips and stuff about it. Yeah. I thought that was a good line. It was nice and very believable.
Especially because I think an overlooked aspect, especially for people who've mostly seen the movies, is that the elves are supposed to be very cheerful, joyful characters, right? I mean, I love the movies, but one of my problems with what's his name? Who plays Elrond? Someone help me out. Yeah, is his portrayal is so grim, and Elrond. Rivendell is supposed to be a place of joy and music and warmth, and so I'm with you. I would love to see a little more of that in this interpretation of the elves. Well, let's move to the last section that I think personally that we should cover before we wrap up for the evening and for the season. is we're going to go back to Rune for one last moment, but fortunately not to deal with the Harfoots. Although, Killian, when you were mentioning the problem with the monologue, we get this monologue sort of towards the end, and they were I felt like clearly trying to recreate Sam's from
Sam's speech. Yeah, it was very obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, oh god, like not another monologue. But there was something that I personally really loved, but I'm not quite sure how it landed for everyone else. That we got to see with who we now know as Gandalf and Tom Bombadil. And first off, I want to get your guys' impression of this aspect of, to bring up the C word again. What do you guys think about the fact that this ends up being Gandalf and him finding his staff? And let's start with you, Sean. Like, what is your take on like how this unfolded? What is there a way that we can put this and that it deserves to be Gandalf in this context? That or how badly is it breaking lore as it's currently understood, or is there an alternate version out there? And what do you think of this portrayal of Gandalf?
I'm not really a fan of Gandalf or the Hobbits being in the show at all. I don't think they're really adding anything to the story. They feel like they're just there to remind us that this is a Tolkien story. In terms of, I don't really like how they've done the review of Gandalf. I think it's slightly insulting to the viewer, if I'm honest. They spent the first season doing a whole, will he, won't he? Is he bad, is he good thing? And then we got to the end, and he obviously was Gandalf, because when in doubt, insert name of Hobbit here, always follow your nose, right? So we knew at the end of season 1 that it was Gandalf. And I think it's slightly insulting to the viewer that they haven't just come out and said it early on in season 2, but fine, whatever. They want to have their little surprise at the end. Oh, look, we did a nice bit of guest. For me, I'm kind of agnostic on it, right? It's not really doing anything. It's not really offending me, but it's not doing anything for me. It certainly isn't in line with lore, really. It's my issue is I don't know what it's adding. What's it adding to this story of the story's called The Rings of Power? What's it adding? Nothing. Absolutely nothing to that story whatsoever.
Well, let's jump right off of that, Strider. Do you think that Gandalf is going to have a role to play in the upcoming elements of the Rings of Power, and in terms of like the story that we know has to happen in terms of Second Age stuff, Battle of the Last Alliance, all that? Do you think he's going to have a role?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
sorry.
Sean, if you want also to comment on it, please go.
Yeah, I was going to say. I just don't know. Apart from him being there in Rivendell when anybody wakes up, the problem I've got is we could have him having a ring because we know he does have one. It's Narya. However, it kind of leads to lots of questions about what's he doing in Middle Earth when the Battle of the Last Alliance against Sauron is going on. And if he's a powerful wizard and he's got a ring. What's he doing with it? For me, I've got a bit of a problem now that he's a bit too powerful of a character nominally, hanging around, wandering around in a desert in the middle of nowhere. It's not very satisfying. I feel like he's obviously him and the Hobbits are going to be that's the thing, right? He's going to be with them in the Shire or whatever later on. But in terms of getting him like hanging out with Elrond or Galadriel or whatever, I just don't know how we get to that point. I have to say, one of the we struggle with. How does he fit in? I can't see it.
Yeah. On my side, I think I'm actually extremely curious. I would have cut all of this out of the show, to be fair, all the Harvest stuff and so on, and this whole thing going on. But since we do have it, I'm very curious where this is going, because as Sean said, like it's really hard to see where this storyline will go, what we're going to do, where will he be in all these great events that will be unfolding in the next 3 seasons. However, I'm at the end of the day, I am quite happy with this being Gandalf still, even though I was absolutely rooting for one good, one bad Blue Wizard. That was my whole hope for the last 3-4 years. I feel like Daniel Wayman is a wonderful Gandalf. I feel like he is he has this very wholesome, warm personality. It's really good, and actually also I saw this comment. I feel like on Reddit or Twitter somewhere. So I'm not taking credit for it, but the way but it helped me accept this whole arc of discovering that this is Gandalf, because perhaps one of the reasons why we went on this journey is also because Ian McKellen's Gandalf is such an iconic character. It's so hard to imagine somebody else playing Gandalf. So, in a way, having this arc of seeing Daniel Wayman discovering who his character is, and just falling in love with the character without the name on it, without knowing from the start for sure that this is Gandalf. I feel like that also gave us the chance to kind of warm up to this portrayal more. And I feel like Daniel Wayman, when all is said and done, and like taken into consideration, I feel like he really for me did a great job.
Yeah.
So whether for better or for worse, we do have Gandalf in the show, and we are lucky that the casting is, in my opinion at least, terrific. So whatever it is, I'm hoping, and I do have faith. I do think that Daniel Wayman will be able to pull it off, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And who knows? Yeah, a lot of things from season 1 that were set up were very confusing, but I feel like season 2 did manage to fulfill a lot of the things that they did set up. A lot of it not what we expected, not what we hoped for, but still, it feels like they did manage to pull off a lot of payoff. So hopefully, they will manage to somehow make all of this work. But I definitely share all the little stress about it, where it's going.
I just want to ask. We'll ask one more question of Killian, and then we'll move into our wrap ups. And this is about still about this scene. I want to bounce off what you were just talking about with acting portrayals, Strider. And in this scene, we have Gandalf alongside a character that was not in really any visual adaptation of Tolkien's that we've seen before, Tom Bombadil. And I've seen people have two different takes on this. And what do you think, Killian? Like, what was your opinion of, I guess, Tom overall in the show, and then also the way that this particular arc and narrative wrapped up in this particular in this season and in this episode?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I fell off my chair when I found out it was Gandalf. I'm still recovering from it. It was just.
I'm still convinced.
It was an insane whole thing. What are you convinced about?
I'm still convinced it's going to be Celeborn.
No, it was really like so odd to do this. Literally, and to do it in the last episode of the 2 seasons leading up to this thing that everyone's known from basically the second that he landed beside a load of hobbits. Everyone knew this. It was just like obvious. So it was just really odd to do that. But I mean, yeah, I guess the acting is good. It's hard because Gandalf is probably most people's favorite character. So he's someone that a lot of people really have a strong like identity with and love him. And so it's kind of I guess seeing him as this person who doesn't know himself, when he's usually someone who is a sort of a leader and a voice of like guidance and stuff like that. Seeing him in this state of like, who am I? What's going on? And he's learning and stuff like that. I suppose there is something interesting to it, but he doesn't feel very Gandalf-y in that. So yeah, I kind of found that kind of hard. Tom Bombadil, he's also this kind of, I've always found in the books and everything, he's sort of this interesting character that sort of stands outside, and he's a bit perplexing and stuff like that. I think they probably dealt with him quite well, dressing him in very plain clothes. He sort of keeps to himself. He seems uninterested or kind of like, the goings on. He's been around for so long, the goings on of things don't interest him that much, and he's sort of he'll help if he can or whatever. But he's yeah, I think overall actually I didn't dislike it. I was a real like, here's Tom Bombadil, kind of like we're gonna stick him in there somehow so that everyone he wasn't in the movie, so here he's gonna be in in the show. And I don't know if he's really woven in a way that really makes sense, or especially if the show's called Rings of Power and he doesn't seem to be affected or, you know, in like that. It's like, okay, we'll just stick him in. But I didn't mind him, you know, a man who's just into his cabbages and tending things and stuff. Like it's not a bad character to have in the show, I suppose.
Yeah, so that would be really a great subtitle for the show: The Rings of Power, unless you're Tom Bombadil. Yeah, I'll just add to that you know, I was not a fan of the decision to make it Gandalf here. I thought Blue Wizards were a more interesting choice. Tom Bombadil, I was excited to see him, but like you said, does he really fit? And yet, for all that, this last scene to me was just so cozy and warm, sort of magical. And it didn't really make sense story-wise, but they did a great job shooting it and making the way that I want these two characters to feel together. And so I do want to, you know, give the show some props and the win for that one.
I could just see some people saying stuff about Tom Bombadil being a bit more unhinged and boisterous, and I know he could have been a bit more mad maybe, and like singing a bit more. I thought there could have been more music to him. Like he kind of hummed in a way that you might hear an old man humming in a pub, but he wasn't, you know, I don't know if he actually could have been a bit crazier and funnier maybe, I don't know, but overall I didn't hate it.
That's a good point. And it's like Vicky says, right? Like how do you do that in a show without it feeling super ungrounded, right? Which is the risky run. So maybe they want a bit of a safer way, but well, because we're now officially over 2 hours, believe me, I got a lot more questions that I left off the table here, but let's wrap up. And Killian, Sean, one thing we've done at the end of every episode is start with your least favorite thing about the episode, your favorite thing about the episode, and then something you're looking forward to in the next episode. But this time, as I see you racking your brains, since it's episode 8, I want to hear what was your least favorite thing about the season, your favorite thing about the season, and then what you're really give me some sort of fun theory about what you're hoping to see in season 3. And try to not, like, we all know maybe some of the more obvious points, but something that you would be excited to see that maybe we're not quite sure we're going to get. And in the meanwhile, everyone on the stream, please chime in with your thoughts on that. We'll put them up. We can't wait to see what you guys put. And let's start with Strider, and then we'll work our way up to the top.
Thing I didn't like. I think honestly the big issue throughout the show, and it was felt less in this season, but it still felt throughout it. The lack of screen time. So many things are cut. The fact that we have such a limited screen time is the thing I hate the most, because I feel like it really takes away from scenes that could feel properly impactful. It doesn't always work out because it's like there's a scene or two missing, and they have to condense some of these big things into smaller like moments. So I feel like this kind of took away from my enjoyment in many of the moments throughout the season, but much less than season 1. Things I liked, there's way too many to properly list them, so I'll just say that someone said in the comments, so quick shout out to Bear McCreary, who somehow, even though he nailed it in season 1, somehow he did a slightly slightly better job this season, even if it was already perfect. But portrayals of so many characters were just amazing. Adar was fantastic. Arondir had a great moment in episode 4. Elendil was firing on all cylinders this season with the limited screen time he had. Charles Edwards, Charlie Wickers, absolute MVPs of the season, with Adar right there with them, I think. Morphy Clark as Galadriel was really good. So many characters got so many better moments, better writing, and they were able to showcase their acting skills much better. Daniel Bayman, Ronnie Kinnear, I just feel like I was happy to watch this season. There were moments where I really enjoyed it, and I feel like it was great to have these characters on my screen, and yeah, I think that's my it's maybe a cop-out answer, but it's just like to have so many good Tolkien characters on screen done well by the actors and often usually by the script. I love it. Thing I'm looking forward to the most. Well, the easy one is I hope Numenor gets Eregion treatment, but with like 60 minutes more of screen time across the season, at least, than Eregion had this season. But I hope to see Glorfindel somehow. I would love to see him, and I hope we get Celeborn finally next season, not at the end of the season 3, but somehow something earlier. Yeah, I think that's my. It's kind of like all over the place, but it's a big question. So that's my take.
I'll go. Thank you, Strader. I'll go second so we can end with our guests. My least favorite was, I guess, how often the writing felt still, especially in the first half of the season, so clunky. These at least half a dozen times where I ended character sentences for them as I was watching. And I think that like on a show like this, that's sort of kind of inexcusable. Although it is worth mentioning that there's some really brilliant writing in this season, which I don't think really could be said about much of season 1. And so it did, I think, get significantly better. But I just, I'm hoping for another jump of the same size going into season 3. My favorite part, I think it just has to be probably, if I'm looking across the board, the acting. I think the jump in quality of the acting, not that it was bad in season 1, but it was really excellent in this season. And for most characters, you can make little quibbles here and there, especially with a couple of the smaller supporting characters. But largely, we got some like really tremendous fantasy performances, and that is some of the most difficult acting to do. Like, if you ask me, it's sort of underrepresented in the Oscars and stuff to fantasy acting performances, because bringing that level of groundedness and reality to something so is really, really tough. And I think that we saw a lot of really wonderful acting in this season. And what I'm looking forward to, I guess it's more of like a hope or a prayer than like, I really hope they find a way to do something really cool, memorable, and powerful with Entwives. Like, you've introduced them. Don't leave us hanging.
That's my one.
I'm sorry, Killian. Yeah, I could also see them doing it really poorly, but it would be really cool. Killian, you're up.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I guess the thing I liked the least was definitely the pacing, which still felt off. I mean, it felt like very end loaded, and I think that's probably because they have a lot of I guess like the Hobbit and Gandalf narratives that don't really need to be there and don't feel focused on the overall plot of the show, and then not enough in Numenor, where you're kind of, the politics and everything of it need to be explained more, and the backstories need to be explained more. So, I think that the focus is a little off. But I think what I really liked actually was that the payoffs felt really good in this show. There was some really nice payoff scenes with which, like, a season-long build-up or even longer, where you had moments with Durin and his dad, and both Sauron's kind of the people he's manipulated. I think they were both brilliant. And then I also thought like there was some good like action scenes. Elrond, I think, was a big win this season. He was a lot more kind of, he was very different from his portrayal in Peter Jackson's films. He was kind of, there was a lot more to him almost. And like there's that scene where he kills the orc and puts him on the catapult and flies him into the wall. I was like, that was kind of cool and whimsical and very cinematic and stuff you wouldn't get in a book maybe. So I like that. What do I think is going to go for? Well, I thought, I always liked the plot that the Ents just lost the Entwives, and when I saw them in there, I was like, okay, well, are they going to show this, and how funny and strange is it going to be? So I mean, I was really interested in seeing that, but I guess Gregory already said that, so I guess, I don't know, hopefully less hobbits.
And what about you, Sean? Close us off.
Yeah, so I think I agree with everybody about the pacing. The pacing was better than season 1, but still is not right. I have to say, the entirety of episode 4, I would just put it in the bin and I would never want to see it ever again. I thought episode 4 was awful, and I think a lot of us felt similarly, and I could just have done without it. In terms of what I really treasured, there are a few things. I mean, I think we often forget. I think broadly speaking, the costumes are on point, the set designs are on point, the music is on point. Does it look and feel like Middle Earth? Yes, it does. I feel like fundamentally for me that my favourite part of the series was that relationship between Sauron and Celebrimbor, how that developed, how that moved, the emotionality of it, I think was incredible. I think my favourite individual moment was probably in episode 7 when Celebrimbor realizes that he's trapped in this vision and he's escaping it. And that for me, I thought was fantastic. In terms of what I want to see, I've heard a few of them already. For me, I want to see some of the other locations of Middle Earth that we should be seeing. So I want Galadriel to be going to Lothlorien and maybe meeting Amroth there. I'd like to see Greenwood before it becomes Mirkwood. I'd like to see the Númenóreans in Tharbad and Farnfall and Umbar. I want to see those locations of Middle Earth as well. That colonisation of Middle Earth that the Númenóreans are doing. I think it was hinted at the end there with Pelargir. I want to see more of that as well. And ultimately, I want us to be going towards that ultimate fight between us all and Sauron. That's where we've got to get to, right? This is the ultimate battle of good and evil of the three peoples of Middle Earth lined up against Sauron.
Yeah. Excellent answers. I just want to give a shout out to all of the fantastic comments that we're getting, and in particular, just all of our regulars who show up pretty much every week and are constantly chiming in. Thank you so much for being here. I want to give another shout out to Harry for doing a great job on the back end. And Harry is really he's the founder and really the heart and soul of Fellowship of Fans. So Harry, thanks for all the hard work. This is our last episode of the season. So Killian, Sean, wonderful job tonight. Thank you so much. Strider, thanks again for being here. And once again, thank you to all of
Thank you for hosting.
My pleasure.
Yeah, big up to Gregory, the birthday boy.
Yes.
And happy birthday to Gregory once again.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
let's hear it in the chat.
And thanks everybody for joining us once more on this with this amazing Fellowship of Fans. Have a great night.
Yep.